This is a good movie that could have been a fantastic movie. It's got great dramatic scenes.
I'd just like to get to the point, Mr. Garvin.
I am getting
Mr.
to the...
Garvin, I believe I have the right to ask the witness a direct question.
It's got terrific acting.
Swore on this form that the patient ate 9 hours.
That's not what I wrote.
It's got two exquisite evil guys. One of them, the opposing defense attorney.
They lied. They lied.
And the judge.
I have no sympathy for you.
It's got an underdog you've just got to root for.
Court exists to give him a chance at justice.
And of course, it's got Charlotte Rampling.
What's your name?
Laura.
Oh, goodness gracious, be still my beating heart. Yeah, boy, she just eats up the screen with those lovely looks. And of course, she's a fantastic actress as well. But this movie falls flat in the last 20 minutes because of the writing. And in my perspective, the ending is just horrible. Though most people who watch this movie love the ending. Okay, so as you know, I'm not going to give away any plot spoilers while I do a general overview on this movie. And then I'm going to dive into it. I'll give away plot spoilers. I'll let you know when that's about to happen.
All the gin joints and...
You're busy living.
I watched Sea Beans.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
This movie is about a drunk guy, a drunk attorney, who's now an ambulance chaser. Yeah, he's chasing down widows.
Don't hesitate to call.
At funerals to try to go after whoever and whatnot. It's just pathetic. They do a really good job with it. Anyway, he used to be an A-list attorney, top notch, first rate, and graduated second in his law class. So he used to be a big shot, but something happened at an attorney firm he was with about 4 years previous. And since then, he's been a drunk and an ambulance chaser. Well, he's got a partner in his current law firm, though he hasn't been taking cases himself. His name is Frank. The old codger, who's his partner, is a nice guy, and he just hands Frank a case, an easy case. It's a medical malpractice case, and it's pretty certain that the doctors on the other side of the case and the church that owns the hospital, they're going to settle. They're going to give a large payout. So the woman that was greatly harmed in the malpractice, her sister and brother-in-law are the ones who are going to be the recipients of the money. And so it's supposed to be easy. Well, and Frank is at a point in his life where he just doesn't care about anything. Well, all of a sudden, Frank starts caring. I won't tell you why in this case, but he starts caring about this case, about the woman who got hurt. And so, does Frank really want to take the easy payout, or does Frank want to take it to court and get more of a payout? He wants to take it to court. That's not giving away much. This happens early in the movie. I think it's also in the trailer. So this is where the movie starts getting meaty, and then Frank goes up against these just incredibly evil people. The defense attorney who's being paid a lot by the church to defend the two doctors and to defend the reputation of the church. And then you've got a judge that doesn't seem to be very sympathetic of Frank. So Frank is up against it. And it's good. The way this is done, the acting is really well done. The pacing gets a little bit slow sometimes. But then, of course, it starts gaining momentum. Frank gets a girlfriend in the middle of all this, and there's an interesting twist on her, which is truly interesting, and adds to the plot development. And then, of course, it goes to court. And really, this is where the movie starts falling apart. It starts falling apart a little bit before the court scene. And that's really all I want to say. I'm not going to say, obviously, how it turns out. It's very dissatisfying for me. But as I said, most people who watch this, and evidently the New York Times and all the critics loved it. It was written by David Mamet, the director is Sidney Lumet, or Lumet, I'm not sure exactly how that's pronounced. But anyway, David Mamet, the writer, drops the ball at the end of this movie. My perspective. You may love the ending. But anyway, so that's it. The underdog attorney is really fun to root for in this. And yeah, so that's the general overview on this. And now I'm going to take a deep dive into what I consider to be the great parts of this movie and the failings in this movie. Okay. Okay, I'm going to jump to that last courtroom speech by Frank, that horrendous speech, emotional speech by Frank at the end. The worst speech to a jury I've ever seen in all of my years of watching the final speech by an attorney to the jury. I'm going to get to that here in a second. I'm going to go over it, actually. It's a couple of minutes, and just dissect it a little bit and talk about how horrendous it is. But before I do that, I want to talk about why this movie fails. It is a good movie, as I said earlier, and I still like it. I'll probably never watch it again because of the ending and what I'm about to talk about. The two places this movie fails is Frank never gets his shit together. He never does. It's not too much for us to ask that this should be a gun battle, meaning a battle of the minds between Ed Concannon, played splendidly and deliciously by James Mason, and Frank, played by Paul Newman. That's what this should be. They're outsmarting each other. And eventually, Frank does the final outsmarting. Somewhere along the line, that's got to happen. He's got to show the jury the evidence. He's got to be able to give them concrete, at least one concrete reason to give the award, for him to win, without appealing to emotion in a final speech, which is just Deus ex machina, God from the machine. That's what it is. He didn't win, so what's he got to do? He's got to plead and beg and moan, the rich and the poor.
There is no justice. The rich win, the poor are powerless.
And the prayer of justice and stuff like that. What? I mean, oh my God, I just almost wanted to throw up.
They are in fact a prayer.
He lost the case. He lost the case. That is where this movie fails. He lost it in at least 5 different areas. He did absurd things. I could see maybe the first time mistake he makes, like with the judge, when he pisses off the judge who's already making it clear which side he's on this, the settlement, and Frank pisses him off. Yeah. I mean, really, is that the way you want to start a trial, with a pissed off judge? And then Frank goes at the obstetrics nurse at her place where she lives.
I can subpoena you, you know.
Well, maybe you just better do that then.
And of course, she calls attorneys a bunch of whores, which I won't argue with, even though I've got a few attorney friends. But, they've heard me say that before. But instead of being sympathetic, getting the judge to be sympathetic, getting her to be sympathetic, he needs her to testify. Well, she's not going to. So he's just obstinate. And then with the anesthesiologist on the stand.
It's right there on her medical chart. She was anemic. Less blood, less oxygen.
Frank and Mickey, played wonderfully by James Warden. Frank and Mickey did not prepare well enough for the anesthesiologist. So they did not see that part about anemia. That bomb the anesthesiologist drops there, shutting Frank up and making Frank think he's going to lose the case. If they would have consulted another doctor, another anesthesiologist about that and found out what does that mean? And from my perspective, what it means is if it does mean that she's not getting enough oxygen to the brain, well, then what they do during the operation is give her extra oxygen, extra high octane oxygen, like however they do that, like for sports athletes, to make sure that her brain has enough oxygen. So it would actually be on the anesthesiologist to make sure she got that because she had anemia. So if Frank had done his homework, he would have seen that part about the anemia. He would have talked to another anesthesiologist. What should they have done? So when the anesthesiologist does this in the movie, what is his name, damn it? I think it was Wesley Addy as Dr. Towler. But when he said that about the anemia, Frank can fire back and say, isn't it the job of the anesthesiologist to make sure she has enough oxygen in her brain? And that way, when her brain does go out, there's plenty of oxygen in there. And so wouldn't that be the case that she wouldn't be brain dead after 2 minutes in that case? You know what I mean? Proper preparation prevents poor performance, the 5 Ps. So that's how he could have come back. He could have won that right there. That right there by itself gives the jury plenty of ammunition. By itself. At that point, Frank doesn't have to do the emotional speech at the end. And then when he brings on his witness, Caitlin, played nicely by Linda Krause. So when he's got Caitlin up on the stand, he knows that the copy document isn't going to be allowed. So, but what he does do is gets the information from her. And then when the Ed Kincannon pops up and says the copy can't be allowed. In fact, even when he's interrogating her, he could say, well, you've got a copy, but that won't be allowed. But what you're saying will be allowed about you doctored it because the anesthesiologist asked you to. And then when Ed Kincannon objects to not just the copy document, that was fine, but objects to any testimony from Caitlin. That's obviously ridiculous because her original testimony is on the original document. She's saying, I changed it. The anesthesiologist asked me to change it. And then what they should have done is shown the document where it doesn't look like a natural 9. It looks like somebody painted or drew a parabola on the 9. You know, it's like there's a lack of information here. And then Frank doesn't object when Ed says all the testimony should not be allowed. Of course, that original testimony has to be allowed. Frank jumps up before the judge can say anything. Then if the judge doesn't allow the original testimony, he can't do that. But if he does, well then, at that point, Frank asks for a mistrial. But so the whole thing is set up in this movie. The reason the writer, David Mamet, the reason he keeps doing this, keeps making Frank not be prepared, not say the right things, is because he wants this ending. He wants this ridiculous speech ending. He wants an emotional ending on this. Here, I want to back up to one more thing. The doctor that Frank and Mickey brought in, the black doctor that they brought in. By the way, that sort of slight racism that Frank had, I guess that was the way it was back in 1982. He's going to have less credibility because he's a black doctor. It's unfortunate. But they didn't prepare him well enough, and they didn't prepare themselves well enough. They should have. One thing good defense attorneys do is they know what the weaknesses are in their witnesses. So Frank knows that Ed Kincannon is going to go after the fact that this doctor has testified many times and that he's not an anesthesiologist. He's just an MD. So instead of making it to where it sounds negative from Ed, Frank asks him those questions. So he gets to and making it to where Frank is just making it clear that he's stating an opinion on this case, and he's done that other doctor, what's his name? Is it Dr. Thompson? He does a fine job. But, that's the way you deflect, or that's the way you mitigate the negative aspects of witness. Obviously, this just keeps not getting done. Frank just keeps losing. And so it sets it up where he has, in fact, when he's lost the case. When the evil judge says that Caitlin's testimony can't be accepted, can't be used, and warns the jury, well, he's got nothing. He's got a nothing burger. Frank's done. So before he's about to do his closing statement, I'm like, what's he going to say? There's nothing to say. Sorry, folks. Lost this. And the fact that they brought him back a victory? Come on. You can't celebrate that. I mean, yeah, of course. You want the doctors to suffer. You want Ed to fall like a dead rat, or a rat falling off a cliff. You want the judge to be incredulous. You want all of those things to happen. You want the sister and brother-in-law to be able to pay for the injured woman. But Frank didn't win it. He didn't win it the right way. So Sidney Mamet just pulls a rabbit out of his hat. So let's go over this last scene, or that last speech by Frank in the courtroom. And I'll just stop it occasionally and say how just utterly stupid it is. Okay, before we get going on this, I want to say that though the speech itself is just ludicrous, the way this is set up is really awesome. The fact that he stands up and doesn't even look at the jury for a full minute and a half while he talks. I found that very effective, so that the momentum builds up. And once the momentum builds up and he starts walking towards the jury, there's a lot of inertia, emotion working there. So as bad as the speech itself is, this is really well done. And the perspective by the director also is quite well done. And there's a little known fact on this scene right here, folks. Guess who one of the audience members is? Bruce Willis. 1982 is when this movie came out. Bruce is way over on the right. He's got that deadpan look on his face. Yeah, he was working off Broadway at the time, and I guess talked to the producers and said, "Hey, can I be in the audience when Paul Newman makes his courtroom speech?" So he's in there. So anyway, all right. So I just want to talk about the absurdities in this real quick. So, because evidently nobody else is talking about this. So let's go. This is good acting. That paper, that's also a nice touch. That paper, I think, is the copy of the admissions lady in front of him. And he's just kind of throwing it aside. The jury's going to look at that. And he's just kind of flicking it aside like, well, the judge said this is worthless. It's nice. It's a nice touch.
Well, so much of the time we're just lost. We say, please, God, tell us what is right. Tell us what is true. I mean, there is no justice. The rich win, the poor are powerless.
Goodness gracious. Appealing to the cliched emotions, the rich and the poor.
We become tired of hearing people lie.
What's that got to do with anything?
And after a time, we become dead. A little dead. We think of ourselves as victims. And we become victims.
Okay, so what's the point of that? We think of ourselves as victims and we become victims? How is that relevant? I just don't even see how this is relevant. It's almost like Mamet is just making a general sort of statement about humanity on this. It's just not even, it's just like a non sequitur.
We become ourselves, we doubt our beliefs, we
Amen.
doubt our institutions, and we doubt the law. But today you are the law. You are the law.
Okay, we doubt our institutions, we doubt the law, but today you are the law. I'm going to ask you to put aside the fact that I was not able to prove my case. So you are the law. So your decision matters here, whether I was competent or not. It's pathetic.
Not some book, not the lawyers, not a marble statue, or the trappings of the court. See, those are just symbols.
See Bruce Willis back there getting closer in the close-up? I just can't stop looking at that dude.
Of our desire to be just. They are in fact a prayer.
So here's the setup. Those statues, the trappings of the court, the justice system, they are a prayer. They're a prayer. No, they're symbols of justice. They are symbols of doing right and wrong.
I mean, a fervent and a frightened prayer.
Frightened prayer?
In my religion, they say act as if you had faith. Faith will be given to you.
Okay, what the hell? What the hell? Act as if you have faith. Faith will be given to you? How does, again, a non sequitur. What does that even mean?
If we are to have faith in justice, we need only to believe in ourselves.
No, that's just simply not true. And you don't have faith in justice. Justice is just justice. But let's just take him. If you're going to have faith in justice, then you have to make sure that the system is good. It has nothing to do with believing in yourself. But I suppose this is Mamet's way of saying he's about to bring it back around to the people in front, 12 people in front of him who are now the law. This doesn't make sense.
And act with justice.
Well, if they act with justice in this case, he did not prove his case. He didn't prove his case. As much as I want him to win, if I'm sitting on that jury, I've got to laugh at this guy.
See, I believe there is justice in our hearts.
There we go. They're emotional. And he gets patted on the arm here by Mickey. Oh, that was so thoughtful. Okay. The main aspect of this, it's just, the whole thing is just a complete non sequitur. I mean, none of it made any sense. Did it make any sense? No, it doesn't make any sense. So it's an emotional appeal to the jury members. And evidently they all went with it in this movie anyway. And I imagine that maybe this happens sometimes in civil cases, but this is just, it is Deus Ex Machina. It's Mamet intentionally doing this. It still is, but it's Mamet not. Mamet was asked about the ending on this, and he said he didn't want something that was old-fashioned. Old-fashioned meaning actually makes sense? Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. He messes it up over and over and over. Okay, so also, I guess another thing I really wanted if we're gonna have the win on this, I want to hear how much the amount is. I mean, come on, it's a small thing, but and I guess also while we're at the end, I didn't think that phone would ever stop ringing. Oh my God! Pick up the damn phone, pull the cord out of the wall, something, please, please. I cannot listen to this anymore. And the ending for Charlotte Rampling's character Laura was fitting. So there on the bed. Okay, so let's just go over. I just kind of want to go through this a little bit and talk about how most of the movie up until the last 20, 25, 30 minutes is actually quite well done, with just a few sort of hiccups here and there. But he is portrayed. I like the way it starts out with him being portrayed as an ambulance chaser. It's just cringeworthy watching him. Especially with that first older woman and just other people. And then, of course, he gets kicked out that one time. And you're just embarrassed. I mean, I was just so embarrassed for this guy. Oh. What he's doing, that sort of ambulance chasing, is despicable. But more than anything, you just kind of just feel sympathy and pity for this guy. It's really bad. It's really well done. In fact, he's so bad he can't even win at pinball. And evidently, he bolsters himself with that beer with a raw egg in it. I'd never heard of that one before. And then what I found was a nice touch on this. One of the nice touches on this movie is when he's got his confidence back. Seems to have his confidence back later in the movie, and he's going in to kill it in court. He thinks, well, he passes right past the beer and the eggs. That was a nice sort of, don't need the booster anymore. Nice touch. One of the scenes that I liked but thought they could have done better was when he was with the girl, the woman who is in a comatose, or she's out of it. She's practically dead for all intents and purposes. When he goes in there to take pictures of her to use to get a lot of money out of the bishop. And then that scene should have played out a little bit more. It's nicely done. It's a nicely done scene. But his epiphany on his own feelings and sympathy for her comes just a little bit too fast. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more subtlety. As he walks in, he kind of glances, he sees her face and, has a look on his face, goes over, take the first picture from the back. He's still fairly nonchalant, but then as he goes over to take a picture of the front and he lifts up the camera, this is what I wanted to see, lifts up the camera, kind of hesitates again as he looks at her and then takes a picture. And then as he's walking back to take another picture from behind, we see his face sort of thinking. That's what I wanted to see. I wanted to see a little bit more emotional movement there. Instead, what we get is the camera drop on that third picture he's going to take. The camera starts dropping, and he starts realizing that she's a human. So I like the idea. I just didn't feel like they panned that out enough and made it to where we were utterly convinced that there was a sea change in his empathy. But that said, the way they metaphorically showed his sea change in empathy with the pictures developing right before our eyes, wow, that's nice cinematography. It's nice directing by Sidney Lumet. So that was very well done. I think the whole Charlotte character was well done. I suspected that she was the mole. Wasn't sure about it, and I guess the fact that I wasn't sure about it says something about how well they did on Laura. Sorry, I called her Charlotte a while ago. On Laura, played by Charlotte Rampling, played very well by her. But that was well done. I really, really like that scene with Ed Concannon, where he's walking around praising somebody, offering a drink. course, we see that it is her, and she does not look too happy. And she's not so unhappy that she doesn't take the check and let Frank know that she is the mole. And of course, Mickey finds out. I like that look on Mickey's face. I like the fact that he doesn't say anything right then. He's a good attorney. He realizes he has to go talk with Frank first, and they see what they're going to do and maybe use her. That's what I actually thought they were going to do. I thought they were going to use her. I think that would have been a nice twist on this. I don't know how exactly, but use her as leverage. So obviously, several other good scenes. You got Frank with the archdiocese. Was he a cardinal? I'm not sure exactly what he was, bishop. But Frank is just out of it. I mean, it's almost a joke and then of course he doesn't take the money, the $210,000. And I'm sitting there thinking, you better take that money, bro. And then Frank meets with the doctor who's going to be the witness. He's really credible. He's really good. And then, of course, I'm thinking again, well, don't put all your eggs in one basket. You know, you're going to go up against it. You know, what if something happens to this guy? What if he disappears? And of course, he does disappear. And then I was disappointed with how Frank handled that with the lady who answered the door, saying that he was in the Caribbean on vacation. That Frank, it doesn't come to Frank to throw back the words that doctor gave him when Frank asked him, why are you doing this? And the doctor says, it's the right thing to do. Yeah. I mean, why doesn't he tell the lady, write down on a piece of paper, it's the right thing to do? And then Frank Galvin. And tell her it's an emergency note for the doctor. Please send it to him and see if you can get a change of conscience on the doctor. I mean, part of my point in this is Frank did not go down. He's hardly ever shown to be competent in this, to be thinking ahead, to be circumspect, to figuring out exactly how he's going to beat these nasty guys, Ed and his crew. How's he going to beat them? He's up against it. And so with this story that Mamet wrote, you never really get a sense of who this guy used to be. He doesn't pop back in. It doesn't come back to him like riding a bike. And it's really frustrating to watch. If you've got your thinking cap on at all in this movie, it is just painstaking. Boy. I mean, you're just sitting there going, you should do this, you should do that. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Constantly throughout this. So much so. And I kept thinking, well, he's going to get on his game sooner or later. Of course, it doesn't happen. And he has to have that Deus Ex Machina speech on emotions to get the jury to do what it did. I forgot to say how much I like that line by Frank when he was in front of the bishop, and Frank said, if I take the money, I'm lost.
I brought snapshots to show you so I could get your money. I can't do it. I can't take it. Because if I take the money, I'm lost.
That was nice. I thought that was going to be a turning point. In the sense of his passion and empathy and caring, it was a turning point. But it wasn't a turning point in him becoming awesome again. So he just ends up being quite emotional. I mean, he's driven to some degree, but not driven to think. And then I also enjoyed the depictions of Ed and his crew. I mean, Ed preparing the anesthesiologist, almost making fun of him, doing the sort of witness preparation. Those were good scenes. And his crew following him around like puppies and worshiping him. It was nice. The scenes with the judge were really well done. That first time with the judge, played really well by Milo O'Shea. Really nicely played by him. Boy, he's a squirrely character, isn't he? And the fact that he's on the defense attorney's side, that he wants the settlement, you're not really sure why. I mean, what does he care? Is he getting paid off? Has he gotten paid off before? But Frank doesn't stand up for himself and instead gets nasty with the judge. Not a good thing to do. But that one scene with the judge in court.
9 minutes in itself constitutes bad medical practice.
Your Honor,
Yes, Mr. Galvin.
if I may be permitted to question my own witness in my own way.
I'd just like to get to the point, Mr. Galvin.
I am getting
Mr.
to the-
Galvin, I believe I have the right to ask the witness a direct question.
That's startling, stunning. When the judge stands up and interferes and at the end says the doctors were not negligent. And Dr. Thompson acknowledges that that is the case.
Then you're saying there's no negligence, based on my question.
Given the limits of your question, that's correct.
The doctors were not negligent.
And no matter what Frank can say after that, if you're going to try my case, at least win or something like that, it just doesn't work. I mean, Frank really, at that point, a good lawyer would have gone to the jury and talked to them and maybe gotten fined by the judge. Something. But that was despicable. I mean, it's at that point, he can contest the trial. But it's a stunning scene, so well acted, and the directing on that, going back and forth, was really wonderful. I loved that scene. I just reviled that judge at that point. It's like, also, but the thing that Frank has to do when he realizes he's up against it, it's not just Ed Concannon that he's up against the judge as well. He's got to plan the rest of what he does around that. He's not going to get any sympathy from the judge. Any objection may be overruled. So he's got to make that part of his plan. I would have liked to have seen him and Mickey talk about that. That would have provided so much meat to this movie. If the anger he got from that got channeled into being completely logical and figuring out how to win this damn thing, there's your movie for you. And just real quick, one other scene that I actually really enjoyed on this movie is when Frank and Laura are together and Frank says, "I'm going to lose this case." And Laura says, "I'm tired of being with losers."
You say you're gonna lose. Is it my fault? Listen, the damn case doesn't start before tomorrow and already it's over for you.
It is over.
You want to be a failure? Then do it someplace else. I can't invest in failure, Frank, anymore.
And it seems like she's really on his side. And that actually got me to pause and think maybe she's not a mole. But it turns out really she was just having second thoughts evidently about what she was doing. That seemed straight from the heart what she said, and giving him the energy to go on and fight this thing. So the fact that she's acting against what she is allegedly doing was an interesting twist on this. I really enjoyed that. So overall, this movie, the acting in this movie, I've got my 8 categories, and the story, let's go over them just real quick. The story on this movie is good. The underdog takes on the vicious defense attorney and the corrupt judge. And he's not an ambulance chaser anymore. He's found willpower. He's found his will again to do something good. That whole idea of the story is great. The writing on it is crackling a lot of times and really well done. And then, as I said earlier, it falls through on that ending court sermon that Frank gave. I enjoyed the characters on this. They're well developed. Although Frank's character, I ended up not having not much sympathy for, because he doesn't totally get it together. And he's the protagonist. He's the hero. And that really qualifies this movie. I mean, you've got to love him. So the person I ended up liking more than anybody else was Mickey. Mickey's always good. Mickey's thinking. Mickey's trying to help Frank. So he was the one I liked, although he obviously wasn't a protagonist. The drama on this movie is good in moments. A few of the courtroom scenes are just stupendous. The judge, the Ed interrogating Caitlin. I mean, you're sitting there going, stop asking her if she's telling, to stop telling her about her being sworn to tell the truth. Why is Frank not objecting to harassing the witness? Of course the witness knows she's been sworn in. But almost a full minute is spent on that to give the jury the suspicion that she's telling a lie. Yeah, it's a clever thing. Opposing attorneys do that if the attorney for the witness doesn't say anything. So again, Frank just passively sits by while that's happening. But the directing is awesome on this. Sidney Lumet does a phenomenal job on it. You've got those Polaroid shots. You've got the angles that he uses on this, the moving camera. It's really nicely done. And there's not much of a musical score on this that I'm aware of, so I really don't have much to say on that. And the last thing that I want to talk about is just the pacing. The pacing is generally good, even while they're creating that sort of ambulance chaser persona of Frank to begin with. And I thought they did a nice job of that, him telling just off-color jokes in the bar, and the bar scenes were actually pretty good too. But the pacing kind of falls short when he's on the phone, or while he's sitting around, or while he's destroying his office, or the phone call at the end, So there are moments where I'm like, okay, speed it up, Sidney, speed it up a little bit. I get it. So on the pacing, it lacks some crispness, and this movie is a little bit over 2 hours long. It probably should have been 1 hour and 50, something like that. So it doesn't always work. But anyway, overall, I'm going to give this movie 7 popcorns out of 10. I would give it 6 because I hate the ending so damn much. But I'm going to give it 7 because the writing is generally good. The directing is amazing. The acting, especially by Paul Newman, is just off the charts great. And Mason, and even Rampling. So the acting is exquisite on this. And a shout out to Milo O'Shea as the judge. He did a great job. And of course, Jack Warden on Mickey and several other people. So, including Joe Seneca as Dr. Thompson. So anyway, because of the acting, because of the writing being good for a while, the directing, and the story itself, I'm going to go ahead and give it 7 popcorns. Yeah. So y'all let me know what you think. I'll look forward to that. In the meantime, I'll catch you at the cinema on the next movie review. Take care of yourselves. Bye now.